Open the pod webcam, Hal. I'm sorry, Adam. I'm afraid I can't do that. All right, I'll get it. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ransom Reviews. Today I'm looking at 2001 A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. I really enjoyed the foreword where Clarke detailed the creative process behind writing this book with input from, of course, Stanley Kubrick. They had planned on using this book to then create a screenplay with which they'd use to make the movie. The movie ended up coming out first, but it was actually the book, as is usually the case, that was the original article. The book was an anthology of sorts, a masterful combination of several short stories and ideas piloted by Clarke before, including his classic short story, Sentinel. What's impressive was how massively packed with themes and ideas this book felt, and it's less than 300 pages. I don't even know where to begin, but this book addressed at least the following themes: evolution, destiny, man's relationship to the universe, sentient AI, space travel and the mysteries of the unknown, alien life, advanced forms of life that broke the rules of known reality, gods or beings of mythical power, and I've probably missed a few important themes as well. For me, this book broke down easily into four sections. Section one was man evolving from apes with the help of the mysterious monolith. Section two was man's discovery of the monolith on the moon and subsequent journey to the outer reaches of our solar system. Section three was the conflict between Hal and the crew of the spaceship. And section four was the wildly imaginative and untethered hallucinatory journey through space, reality, time, however you would describe the journey of Dave at the end of the book, that eventually ended in his possible rebirth as a god. I think section one was straightforward and built the foundation for what's to come. Section two was interesting in its contrast between the vastness and mysteriousness of space and the feeling of isolation and specific descriptions of the ship, technology, and daily routines of its passengers. Section three veered towards a whole different genre and was my favorite part of the book. The book, which had been relatively dry and pedantic to this point, suddenly veered into psychological horror as the ship's AI began to malfunction and murder its crew. It's so spooky and abrupt, and yet by the end, you almost felt sympathetic for Hal, who seemed ironically to be undone by human vices. Section four is just wild, brave, and adventurous writing that didn't make sense because it described the indescribable. It's daunting and yet exhilarating. There are so many aspects of this book to praise. Let's start with how timeless it is. Clarke did such excellent work as he described the technical aspects of space travel that despite preceding our trips to the moon, the book didn't feel that dated at all. At least to me, I am not an astronaut. Science fiction often explores visions of the future, and when it's done right, it's haunting and impressive. He predicted our population spike on page 44. Though birth control was cheap, reliable, and endorsed by all the main religions, it had come too late. The population of the world was now 6 billion, a third of them in the Chinese Empire. Clarke imagined the internet 20 pages later. Floyd sometimes wondered if the newspad and the fantastic technology behind it was the last word in man's quest for perfect communications. Here he was, far out in space, speeding away from Earth at thousands of miles an hour. Yet in a few milliseconds, he could see the headlines of any newspaper he pleased. That very word, newspaper, of course, was anachronistic, hangover into the age of electronics. The text was updated every hour. Even if one read only the English versions, one could spend an entire lifetime doing nothing but absorbing the ever-changing flow of information from the news satellites. I loved how mature the handling of alien life was here as well. It's not humanoid. There were no little green men. Instead, they were just hinted at, some sort of presence, difficult to explain because their reality is beyond ours. I think in the case of us ever finding life forms of higher intelligence, This approach seems the most feasible, and it's excellently done here. I also loved the structure of the chapters. Maybe it's my journalism background, but they were all succinct. It lended a natural and distinct sense of progression while reading. Many of the chapters ended with excellent summarizing statements that also foreshadowed and offered foreboding hooks into what was coming, such as this excellent example on page 119. Poole and Bowman had often humorously referred to themselves as caretakers or janitors aboard a ship that could really run itself. They would have been astonished and more than a little indignant to discover how much truth that jest contained. Dun, dun, dun. Clarke did this again and again. I honestly can't think of a book I've ever read with more satisfying conclusions to each chapter. Now to move on to the one criticism I have for this book, and the only reason I can't quite view it as a masterpiece. The characters didn't matter. I wouldn't even say this book had characters. It had people with names. Sometimes they even had particular skills, but they were immensely wooden and forgettable and interchangeable. They simply didn't matter. I actually laughed out loud when I read this passage on page 80. "Ladies and gentlemen," Halverson began, "I needn't tell you that this is a very important occasion. We are delighted to have Dr. Heywood Floyd with us. We all know him by reputation, and many of us are acquainted with him personally." No, I don't know him, and I am most certainly not acquainted with him. He could be any one of the ubiquitous doctors, scientists, astronauts strewn throughout this book. It definitely hurt the impact of the book. When Spaceship Man number 2 died horribly from the machinations of Hal, I just didn't care. Who was he? Whatever. He's dead now. Fine. In fact, I'd argue the most human and relatable character, ironically, was Hal, the supercomputer ship AI. He's burdened with a lie, and it's destroying his identity from the inside out. When threatened with his disconnection, he panicked and became murderous, not out of malice, but rather as a survival instinct. In his final moments, he expressed curiosity, fear, and desperation. Maybe it was Clarke's intent to have the most human character be a machine, but it would have been nice to have other people to care about. Overall, this book is a classic and should be required for any science fiction fan. As I find the 5-star system a bit limiting, I like to use my subjective rating system SLICK, which stands for Story, Language, Ideas, and Characters on a 10-point scale. Here's how I rated 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. For story, I gave it a 9. This story is a fantastic example of epic science fiction, and despite being mostly set on an isolated spaceship, it felt broad and expansive. For language, I gave it a 9. I really enjoyed Clarke's prose, in particular the structure of his chapters. The way he ends each one is so well done. For ideas, I gave it a 10. Unsurprisingly stuffed full of magnificent ideas, as this book was a confluence of several of his previous short stories. For characters, I gave it a 3. Piss poor, really. Hal is the only one that's remotely interesting, and Hal is more of an idea than a character, honestly. I also strive for a contrived comparison with every book. This book is like if the Discovery Channel and Unsolved Mysteries got married, had a book baby. Did aliens manipulate our evolution? Did they leave an alarm to alert them of our presence? Did they set up an interstellar transit system awaiting future use? Will AI eventually surpass and replace humans? Is evolution naturally building towards a godlike, disembodied intelligence? For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps it's you. Thank you so much for joining me again here on Ransom Reviews to take a look at 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. I hope to be back next week if everything goes okay. Let me know in the comments if you read this book, if you enjoyed it. Also, if you watched the movie, I'd love to know what your thoughts on the movie was. Do you prefer the book or the movie? And see you next time. on Ransom Reviews.